Okay, hi everybody. My name is Ana Lantigua. I head up our global partnerships here at Aprimo. And today we're joined by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Andy Didyk. Andy, I'm a big fan of. He joins us from our partners over at Ntara. And the reason I'm a big fan is because he's an East Tennessee guy. I am currently over in Western North Carolina. So Andy and I actually got to get together last week in person to work on the topic that we're going to be talking about today. Which is really centered all around from product data to profits, PIM and DAM's impact on accelerating multi-channel sales. Andy, I'm actually repping Ntara, keeping hydrated during our
That's awesome. Mind. Yes, absolutely. Well, it's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for everyone attending to and bearing with our technical difficulties. We still 2023. Sharing screens, webinars, everybody's seen the memes. We know it's real. So let's hop right to it because we're here today. I gave a little intro earlier, Ana, while you were coming back on to the channel about what the session is about and what we're covering. So the main thing is, we're here to talk about PIM and DAM, or since Ana's here, I'm sure you'd probably rather have it be DAM and PIM. We could talk about how we integrate those projects and how often they work together, but it's interesting. We're going to talk about market pressures, what's going on in the world, and why brands, manufacturers, retailers, distributors need to pay attention to the way that these two systems can work together and why they're often seen as separates. We'll also be tackling some things around confusion in the marketplace, which is where we'll start. Because as much as we love both PIM and DAM, it's an interesting situation where a lot of DAM products have some PIM capability, and many PIM products have some DAM capability. And there are organizations that may have one, they may have the other, they may have both, but in most cases where we're engaged as a systems integrator and consultant, we're not seeing these two things being used together in order to accelerate multi-channel sales in the way that they can. There's a few standout exceptions we'll talk about in a moment. But I think a good place for us to start and ground the conversation is just to start talking about with DAM and with PIM, what the strengths are of each systems. I think this audience is well educated and understands the basic differences between the two. But when is a DAM system far superior to a PIM? What is it meant to handle? And then in the same way, when is a clear case for PIM and not DAM functionality that can be extended a little bit? So maybe we could start with the DAM case, and for that I'll turn it over to Ana to talk through when is DAM really the most important system to be used? When is there a clear business case for DAM and DAM alone?
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so everybody, for a little bit of background too, for the past 4 years at Aprimo, I've built out a lot of the technology partnerships that exist today. The two most widely sought after integrations into DAM are largely CMS and PIM. Both CMS and PIM typically have a lightweight media manager attached to it. So I get the question quite frequently from clients of, well, why can't I just utilize that and have that act as my DAM? So really the areas where DAM shines far stronger than some of the overlap in systems that exist within PIM and CMS as well is really all around deeper requirements around content and how your content is being properly utilized across your entire ecosystem. So that's product content, that's corresponding materials, maybe around packaging. As you start to think through global rights with content as well, that becomes a real area where DAM starts to shine. So if you're thinking about not just your product content, but packaging, disclosures, video associated for corresponding marketing campaigns that are going out around it, that's really the shining light for where DAM needs to start coming into play. We do have and thankfully it's less and less these days, as Andy can attest to. We do have a couple different clients that have taken DAM, and because of the robust capabilities around metadata, we'll store like certain product information in there, but DAM is not meant to act as a PIM. So Andy, why don't you go ahead and give an overview of where PIM truly shines?
Absolutely. So similarly, we've seen a lot of PIM products throughout the years have and contain a lightweight media management system. And that's really what it is. Although sometimes if you're trying to push a product, you're trying to get a project done, you may use it as a DAM to store and handle images. But PIM is fundamentally different. I mean, with DAM, it really is, it's in the name, it's digital asset management. You have an asset-centric point of view. It's the visual asset that supports the sale and the marketing of the product. It may be complicated by things with rights management and things like you spoke about with pictures of models and other supporting folks in the CPG world, or other assets in the B2B world, such as safety data sheets and other things like that. But in the end, it's the assets, it's arguably the most important assets that are going to support the sale of the product. A PIM platform is a product-centric view of the world. So inherent to that is a product and item hierarchy. Now, this isn't needed for someone who's got 500 products, and I mean, there are exceptions to that, and maybe 2 people who are managing products. They're probably using Excel as a PIM right now. But in the larger space, when you get to 40,000 products and each product has 300 attributes, which are each dimension, weight, maybe it's a color, a size, whatever, you can quickly get to 12 million attributes that have to be managed. And a product and item hierarchy is a way to do that builds efficiencies. A short take on that is if you have one polo shirt, that's an easy thing to think about. It might be part of a line of polo shirts that all have the same materials. And then you have individual sizes that can come off of that. Maybe there's a slim fit versus a standard fit. And those are individual items that reside under the product of that polo shirt within that line. So PIM systems are designed for efficiencies where the individual SKUs and items pull in attributes from that product line on down. And that's just really a different approach than managing the assets to support that product within DAM. There are a lot of other use cases, but another primary one is syndication. So PIM is the platform and DAM syndicates assets, but syndicating products to Amazon marketplaces and other channels that you might have. So manufacturers might be selling through distributors, and each distributor wants to get those products. They want to get their own subset of products. Maybe they don't sell the whole line, and they want to get those products packaged, that information, in a certain way. Or let's say you've got all of your master information for the product in PIM, and you're selling it simultaneously direct to consumer, someone buying that product online. They want a certain set of information about the individual product, or if you're selling it to a distributor, then they're going to want a different kind of information. They don't necessarily need the marketing romance copy, but they probably want to know how many of them fit on a pallet, or a retailer will want to know what the shelf space it's going to occupy is, and things like that, where PIM can serve for product data transformation, both pulling data in and pushing data out to the various locations. So there are other things in here as well, but both systems they were designed and born out of different needs, and they have typically been adopted and designed and configured around those specific needs within each organization, which creates the problem that we're here to talk about today, which is why are those systems not talking to each other, and what does it look like if they do? So Anna, I think a great place to go next would be to talk about the individual, like some client examples of issues that we've seen where PIM and DAM are in place, but they're not necessarily working together. We're working with a Fortune 200 company right now that has both a robust and legacy DAM system for all their product assets. They're a global company, and they're selling consumer brands all over the world. And they also have a legacy PIM system that's in place because they were advanced for the time. But both of those systems were put in to handle things. Think of them more on a vertical technology perspective. And it's interesting because consumer packaged brands will typically they may be structured differently. They might have brand teams. They may have teams that are aligned around specific product offerings or specific product groups that are designed to handle and manage the assets and the PIM. And in B2B organizations, we see more of a situation where they are aligned more around the technology themselves. So you'll have a PIM team and a DAM team. But within this Fortune 200 example that we have, they're really struggling with a DAM that was set up around a certain set of use cases that has become so cumbersome and requires so much manual data entry that they're not able to efficiently get people on board to bring the assets into the DAM, which means there's a shadow DAM that's happening behind the scenes. You know, I think we've all experienced this type of call where it's like, I can't wait for it to be in the DAM, just send it to me through email. And you get to a place where all of the things that the DAM was supposed to do to help you out are no longer possible because people are circumventing the system and not making it easy to use. Similarly, on the PIM side, We have some clients that are distributors are great examples of this, but I think manufacturers and retailers can certainly relate. If you're selling 100,000 products and you're getting those products from maybe 1,000 different retailers or 1,000 different manufacturers, each one of those sources, those inbound channels of product data, are going to send you data in a different way, in a different format. And PIM can be set up, when it's set up appropriately, can be set up to help manage and wrangle all of that data to get it in. But oftentimes the business case is pushing to get that data out as fast as possible. And what happens is that people, again, are going behind the scenes and not taking advantage of those systems to do what they're supposed to do, simply because they're not working well on their own or working on their own together.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I think that's a great overview and some good real life examples as well, what you guys have been seeing as of late over at Ntara. Obviously, you guys work with a slew of different organizations across different verticals as well. And I think that you're really well attuned to the different market pressures that a lot of B2B and B2C brands are starting to face. So can you dive into some of those and give our audience here an overview of what you're starting to see become more apparent in 2024 and beyond?
Absolutely, and I'll give a caveat and say there's a lot on this slide, but we'll try to be as brief as we can. Every client that we are interacting with where the market need is triggering a DAM project, a PIM project, or with a growing minority, a DAM and PIM project together is being triggered by one of these 6 major market factors. The first is scale and going global. I mentioned that global example. If you're a global company and you have brands that are marketed all over the world, you typically have products that it might be the same SKU, but it's sold under a different name in different parts of the world. And that creates a lot of complexity with being able to manage and syndicate both the assets for that product as well as the data that are associated with it. Mergers and acquisitions are down a lot overall, but we do know that they're down overall about 42% for large enterprise. They're accelerating like crazy for the upper mid market. So think companies that are $1 billion to about $10 billion. There's a lot of activity there. So as the scale grows and as companies are picking up additional brands, they have to be able to manage not only all of the assets that they've picked up in that other company or in a merger or whatever, and all the product data, but it might be whole new categories of products that their existing taxonomy isn't set up to use. And that's a perfect time to get PIM and DAM systems talking together. Certainly environmental sustainability, ESG commitments. This is a really big topic right now. I think a lot of people, if you're in consumer goods at all, you're going to be familiar with the digital product passport legislation that's been passed in Europe. It's similar to GDPR around privacy data, if you're familiar with that, where they're going to require a lot of things out of your product data in order to sell in Europe. Namely, you're going to have to be able to trace back all of the individual components that make up that product back to their original sources and be able to report on their environmental impact. Now, that's an overview of a topic that could be a 3-hour webinar by itself, but this is driving the need to organize and catalog your product data in a way that's never been as urgently needed before. That's not in the US yet, and the exact specifications aren't out, but everyone is getting ready, scrambling to prepare for it. Next is omnichannel and fragmentation. So every client that we're talking to, they all want to grow their piece of the pie within their category, but they're also realizing this is not a secret. This has been a trend that's been emerging through the years. People are buying from a lot of different sources. Forrester just released a report saying that 28% of buyers in the B2B space do at least 50% of their shopping in marketplaces. And when you think about an online marketplace, be it Amazon or Grainger or some other, maybe it's a boutique or industry-specific marketplace, you have a situation where as the manufacturer, or even if you're a retailer selling out through a marketplace, you have almost no control over the brand experience except for the consistency and clarity of your product data. And are your images and assets that are supporting that data something that are going to support that sale? So as buyers buy from more and more channels, or they consult, in the CPG world, they'll buy from lots of different channels. In the B2B world, they're going to be consulting lots of different channels before they make that purchase through one or two fewer channels. Again, there's an explosion of places that the data needs to go, and not only needs to go, but needs to be transformed to comply to that endpoint, and also has to be managed from a liability standpoint, so that you are in a place where if you have a rights managed image or something like that with a model in it, it's not something that's floating out in an expired state where you're going to get fined for it later on. That's just one example there. Very quickly, data explosion, we've covered that a little bit. There's more data than ever about products. We talked a little bit about the difference between what somebody needs on a distributor level with understanding how many pallets can fit into a truck versus how many, the consumer wants to know how much does it weigh, what are the dimensions, that type of thing. And then the last two have to do with people, which are a really critical part of DAM and PIM initiatives. One is that manufacturers, retailers, all brands are looking at services as an opportunity to grow their margins as there's more and more price competitiveness among products. And there is also a real shortage in labor. Unemployment's at 3.8%. And at the same time, we just got a report that came out this morning that job openings are down 36% from March of last year. So what that means is that you can't hire your way out of this problem. And that's what we're seeing on our clients. There was a time when people just threw more and more people at this issue of managing data, and they're not able to do that anymore. So those are just a few of the things that are facing B2B and B2C brands right now. And when you look at the way that this impacts the life cycle of a product, and those two things that need to be managed, the assets and the data that go along with it, it's an interesting situation because I think that a lot of folks are familiar with this type of chart. Whether you are a manufacturer who is going to be creating something, designing something from scratch, or you're a retailer that's going to be procuring a product line for this season's upcoming season, this cycle is similar, where you're moving a product from an idea through the design and engineering of that. It has to be sourced, built, sold, distributed, and so forth. And we like to break those down as the make, sell, and buy cycles of product data. Now, we know that from working with a lot of different organizations, product information management is typically seen as the field here within this manufacturing, from the manufacturing point through sales and marketing. It's a single source of truth for sales and marketing data. And then e-com and channel is where the procurement takes place. And digital asset management is the realm of really from beginning to end of those assets that support the product. And you can see just from this chart here, there's a huge amount of overlap between where those things play, which necessitates the systems working together. We've covered why those things don't work together sometimes. The fact that they come from different places, they're used primarily, they start their use cases from different things. But the prevailing wisdom that's coming out of Forrester, Gartner, and I would say the top 10% of brands who are leading in this space is to stop thinking about this as a linear process and start thinking about it as a circular process. Because the product data that starts at the beginning at this design idea, I don't know of any company that's truly, if you think about the linear process is a disposable way of looking at things. You build it and then you get rid of it. You don't use those assets again, you don't use that product data again. But every brand, most brands, even fashion, there's a huge amount of attributes that can be reused in the same way that products themselves can be reused. And so PIM and DAM working together looks a lot like that process where, for example, if you've got a CPG brand that's getting a refresh of the product in the fall, maybe you can go and add new rights to an image that's expiring rather than do it again. A great example of this is an iPhone. And is the 14, is the outside of it that different in every product image that if the insides are what's different, that you couldn't relicense that image and use it again with a different license to it. And same thing with product data. So this is all very high level about how this stuff is supposed to work together. But the top brands in the space are really starting to think this way and starting to make moves towards integrating those two systems.
Part of that too, one of the fascinating points when we were talking like early last week together in Ntara's office is you were talking about the different roles and responsibilities across the organization as they think about the product life cycle. I think traditionally in the past, you've seen clear owners around DAM or clear owners around PIM, and then the organizations will point the finger at one another and say, oh, we have a DAM problem or a PIM problem, not a problem around how we're actually going to market with our products and accelerating our channel sales as well. So can you talk a little bit about what you view as promising change when it comes to terms around organizational roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, that's a great point, because if you look at these are both PIM and DAM systems are huge technology acquisitions for an organization. They're part of transformational projects. But if you look within an organization, there's typically not a chief product experience manager role who's looking at this from the standpoint of what are the efficiencies I can gain if I can get these two systems working together. Often they're brought in to solve an asset problem or a product marketing problem, but they're not being brought in from the top down of how can I accelerate and get my products to market faster. We work with a very large consumer durables manufacturer. They make it's a well-known tool brand, and they pride themselves in getting to market a brand new product from inception, in the start of this process, on the shelf in under 6 months. And the only way that's possible is if the PIM and DAM systems are working together. But very few organizations have someone looking at the way that these two need to play well together in order to accelerate the process. When they are speaking together, you're able to get products to market in a much faster way. And that has to be supported by not only an underlying technological architecture where the systems are talking together, but also there's a human component that you're referring to, where if there's not a chief person involved, a C-suite person involved, there has to be someone willing to reach across the aisle and bring these two together. And then also processes that are in place to help make sure you're taking the best advantage of what both platforms can offer.
That's great, Andy, thank you.
Sure thing. So we talked a lot about, hey, these things need to work together. And I'd like to show just a practical example of what that ideal system architecture looks like when they do. So just very, very simply, if we have a DAM system in place and a PIM system in place that are talking to each other, that are doing the things that the market leaders are doing, you have things like the DAM, which already has some taxonomy in place. It already has SKU associations in place because, and it's usually in terms of projects, a DAM project typically comes before a PIM project does. So if you can port those settings, that data over into PIM and any metadata that exists, you're already going to be 20%, 30% down the road in onboarding a new product into your system and getting it ready to be marketable, in addition to all the compliance things and other ways that you're going to set yourself ahead of the game. And then similarly, the PIM system can pass back product item information and other key product data into the DAM so that you're not stuck in that situation our Fortune 200 client is, who's saying, we have so many manual data fields to enter that my DAM people are spending 50% of their time moving assets around and emailing them and sending them to people outside of the system because it's too hard to use. The reality is that both these teams need a ton of what the other has to offer. So architecting these two systems together is a huge part of the winning equation.
Andy, that's phenomenal. I think I'd love to wrap up on really bringing it all together on what's made possible when you think about bringing your data from your PIM system and marrying it up to the data you store around your content within DAM as well. What that kind of unified view would look like.
Absolutely. Well, there's an emerging branch of product experience management called digital shelf analytics. And I know we're going to give you a moment to talk about what it looks like in the asset world as well. But if you have all of these systems working together, this is a mocked up dashboard. It's not the real thing, but a lot of emerging PXM companies have a version of this where you're getting full circle from the data that's out there. You spend all this time managing data, but what digital shelf analytics allow you to do is get a view of how your product's performing in the wild. It's a snapshot of every retailer that's publicly crawlable or every marketplace that's publicly crawlable and how visible your product is, how complete your product data is it missing images and other opportunities that are out there. This type of information is critical. It will be commonplace in 2 or 3 years. All leading brands are already adopting this and using it. And similarly, you cannot do anything with this information if you don't have robust systems behind this. How can you fix the product data? How can you pinpoint where the issues are if you don't have good systems in place to support it? And I know that Aprimo's got some really exciting things that put you at the top of the Magic Quadrant around the asset view as well, which is only possible through a similar robust integration between the systems.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really important. And to Andy's point, the most innovative companies are starting to switch to this view that they're trying to get far more product centric in the way that they're viewing not only the product content and the related content and all the data around that content, but marrying it up to what they know around product data accuracy, what channels they're being distributed upon, et cetera. I think when you start to look through here, you see the dearth of information that's stored that you can then properly utilize to better personalize at scale and better drive conversions and sales across your channels. You know, as you're looking at this one specific product in the middle, it's important to think about I don't want to keep drawing parallels between just like, it's important to think about your product, your data from your DAM and your data from your PIM. No, it's just this product centric view, right? Here's all the corresponding related lifestyle shots that we could be using in correlation. Here's where this product is currently residing across different geographies and all of the different approval and compliance aspects around that too. And I think when you really start to marry the data from both your PIM and your DAM systems, that's when you're setting yourself up for success by putting down that fundamental bedrock of information that you can then utilize down the road. So I think when you start to think through what success really looks like and what you should start measuring against, it looks something like this.
Absolutely. I know we're short on time. We get started a little bit late due to technical difficulties, but we appreciate everyone for joining us. If anyone would like to stick around, we can certainly, I know Anna and I can stick around and answer some questions, but appreciate everyone's time today. And hopefully this is a massive subject. Hopefully we've covered just a little bit of what can happen when PIM and DAM are working not against each other, but with each other.
Yeah, as you guys can tell, Andy and I can probably talk about this for ages. So I'm also going to pop Andy's information out to everybody in case any of you have questions that you want to follow up directly with him. But if you do have time and you want to stick around, please use the chat box in the corner to go ahead and start throwing some question Andy and I's way. Andy, I know one of the questions for me is, we promised people an end to the debate, PIM versus DAM. So which one is, I'm just kidding. So what I think what would be helpful to know is when you see clients come to you and they do decide to go PIM first or DAM first, I'm going to take the vendor bias out of here. What are those core drivers that would cause them to go with one system over the other for their first leg of the implementation journey?
Sure, there's a lot of variables that are there, but one of the things we do consistently see is if you have a company, we're working with one now, they're a very large mid-market apparel manufacturer, and they're an example of a company going through a true digital transformation. I mean, if there's a term that's been overused in our industry, that would be it, digital transformation. But they really are. They're moving from all manual and custom software dev into cloud-based applications that talk to each other. When you see a company making a monolithic shift like that, it's usually a clear case to say, okay, assets first, product data second, e-commerce third. And there's a big overlap between those three, but that is something that is a common driver for it. More and more, I mean, when we first got into PIM 10 years ago, you would see a lot more first-time transformations like that. I would say now it's more rare. You're going to see about 30% of the time, largely in manufacturing, some distribution that are going to be there. Retailers are usually ahead of the curve in that regard. But PIM first is oftentimes going to be driven by an e-commerce initiative where they're going to be driving to new channels and they want to do e-commerce, and there's usually DAM in place of some kind, and PIM is a necessary prerequisite for e-com.
That's great, Andy. I know that we had another question come in too around the top 2 pitfalls that you're seeing organizations make in terms of how they're managing their product lifecycle.
Only 2?
Narrow it down to 2.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they're not talking to each other. You know, we talked about that role not existing of no chief PXM officer, CPXM officer. I guess there's a reason it doesn't really roll off the tongue that it doesn't exist. But we've got some great stories of we've gone on site with clients to do these PIM and DAM initiatives together. And it's often the first time that the entire product team who's responsible for the assets development, marketing, managing of product data for the entire life cycle of a product line is all together in the same room. We've got cases of people who shared a cubicle wall, who went out to lunch with each other every day and had no idea that they were duplicating 50% of each other's workload in the same system. And it's just such a case where you're in that silo of got to manage assets or got to manage the fields and data, and you're not talking to each other about efficiencies because it's not what's driving you. The tyranny of whatever deadline you've got in front of you is what is, and that's where the value of bringing some consulting in an outside perspective to look at those two things together often is.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Andy. Well, listen, I know that from Ntara's perspective, I know you guys work very frequently in the manufacturing space. You hit on some of those big trends that we're starting to see or continue to see insofar as market disruption and challenges. Are there any that manufacturing in particular are really starting to face as well?
I really feel that those are some pretty universal principles. I'll go back into this one here. Manufacturing is probably making the largest pivot into services of those three groups: manufacturers, distributors, and brands. And by manufacturers, that's a tough term because I also mean consumer brands in that space. And the services may not be paid services like they are with support or maintenance repair as they would be in B2B, but consumer brands are looking to add to the customer experience. They want to manage what that is. Sometimes that's an install service on a consumer good like a dishwasher or a refrigerator or a ceiling fan, even though it's sold through a third-party provider like Amazon. Or it may be something about a curated style experience for apparel, where they're looking to add value in any way that they can and differentiation in any way they can, because consumer loyalty is such a slippery thing these days. It's so easy to change channels. And the way that this ties back to PIM and DAM, because it seems kind of far away, is that we have found efficiency gains of, there's one apparel manufacturer we work with, we uncovered 10,000 person hours, 10,000 person hours a year in automating one process through PIM and DAM that they had been using 5 FTEs for. And you can't grow into services or some other channel, you can't add channels if all of your people are buried in this manual task with spreadsheets and other ways of managing assets, trading files around. And that's just one of the examples of how when these systems work together, there's such a huge indirect benefit to the companies that are looking at things through this point of view.
Yeah, Andy, that's incredible statistics around that too. I think, obviously when we talk about putting together that, just like your basis of data across both DAM and PIM and why it's so important for them to be working in conjunction, one of the things we talk a lot about is it allows your people to really inject themselves back into high value work, right? So one of the trends that I'm starting to see a lot of my PIM partners adopt far more is incorporating Gen AI into the product story as well. Do you want to shine some lights on some quick wins you think Gen AI poses within both of these systems too?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be a good webinar these days if we didn't talk about.
We didn't put some buzzwords in there, huh?
I do happen to have a slide. I'll go ahead and put it up here that talks about generative AI. What's interesting is AI has been around in the DAM space for a really long time. If you look at what Photoshop has been doing and their associated assets, asset management, it's been in there for a really long time. And certainly within Aprimo and other systems as well, the leading systems, as far as looking at a bunch of pixels and using some rules to figure out what's probably in this bunch of pixels, or giving it some examples with machine learning and saying, hey, this is a picture of Andy Didyk, and these are other pictures. These pixels look kind of similar. The face looks kind of the same, so it's probably the same person. And that has use cases that go way, way, way down the trail as far as being able to build efficiencies, being able to reuse assets, being able to discover and find assets, which is a huge part of a DAM's successful implementation. And I know that there are things you can speak to there on the DAM side as well, where you're using that to generate metadata and other really cool stuff. On the PIM side, there are some early wins. They are growing in sophistication, I'll say that. And the earliest ones came out at the beginning of this year, and it basically looked like you're adding a portal, an iframe into ChatGPT into your PIM, where you're able to generate some product descriptions, maybe write some romance copy as a basis and that type of thing. It's very quickly evolving in the SaaS applications to include things like built-in prompts and questions, things to address key issues with generative AI like copyright and workflow, also things to stop people from, just some safety gates that are in there to make sure people don't just hit click, generate product description and move on. There has to be some human intervention and curation of those as well. So there's a lot of interesting work there. And I think some of the most exciting things that will happen will be in the niches. They do make riches, as the saying goes, where you're going to see, you think about what Gen AI needs would look like for something like medical device manufacturing, for a piece of titanium that's going to go in somebody's spine versus the latest pair of of Nikes that are going to be out there. Totally different use cases, and we're going to see generative AI grow into those niches in a way, and that's just going to exceed any other speed of innovation I think that we've ever seen because of machine learning. So short answer is there's a lot of things around product descriptions, generating descriptions. There are also things around data transformation, and I think just buckle up because there's going to be a lot of innovation here coming soon.
And even like SKU consolidations too. I think what would be really interesting, Andy, as like a separate webinar, would be to go back through that when you change the product lifecycle to the cyclical side and go through bubble by bubble and just talk about some kind of quick win use cases for Gen AI in each of those areas. Like one of the things I was hearing for one of our retail clients, they were talking about how they're utilizing Gen AI for their call centers. Whenever they are having inbound questions come in around certain products, being able to use Gen AI and the real language like processing side to be able to surface up answers quickly based off of just their existing FAQ documentation, and seeing massive drops in call center volume as well, which is saving their employees time to be able to focus on, you know, the much more complex questions that they might receive too. Absolutely. So, I mean, there's areas across the board that we could definitely talk through and dive into further.
Yes. I think my only hope with Gen AI, I have so much hope around the efficiency gains. I hope that we can keep up on the people side so that we're not shoveling work that way, that without thinking about the human interaction side, both on those using the systems in the user interface and by, you know, no one wants to talk to a chatbot only. I had an experience recently in customer support where I couldn't get around the chatbot. It was impossible. They didn't have a human being staffing it. I needed to do something that the chat didn't support, for example. So I hope that we can see innovations there with people too, and I believe that we will out of the best companies that are out there.
Andy, I feel like you just have called in so many times to that call center that they just have you blocked and firewalled.
I mean, I'm not that inept. Maybe it is user error. It's possible.
Awesome. Guys, listen, I know that we're 11 minutes over. I really appreciate, I can see quite a few of you have stayed on till the end. So again, if any of you want to reach out to either Andy or myself or both on LinkedIn, feel free to shoot us any other questions that you might have after this. And we really appreciate all of you guys' time today. Andy, thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks. See you in New York next week. Can't wait.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks all.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.